Our first speaker is Dr. Emma Haiyambo. She is the Director of Research and Financial Stability at the bank and Chief Economist. She'll be presenting on the topic, an outlook for the Namibian economy, and some thoughts on strategies for recovery. This presentation will outline Namibia's economic outlook, delve into how countries have shaped their post-COVID-19 recoveries with clear lessons extracted to inform Namibia's recovery efforts. Dr. Emma Haiyambo is a holder of a PhD in Development Finance from the University of Stellenbosch, a Master of Science degree and postgraduate diploma in Financial Economics from the University of London, a Master's in International Business from Polytechnic of Namibia, a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Namibia, and several other qualifications. She also has qualifications in financial inclusion policy as a certified expert, a leading economic, and also completed the leading economic growth program at the Harvard Kennedy School. She attended leadership and diversity programs for regulators, as well as several other management development programs. She served recently as Director of Strategic Communications and Financial Sector Development at the Bank of Namibia since 2016. She has served in several roles at the Bank of Namibia from 2000 to 2002 as an economist, senior economist, and later Deputy Director for the following functions: Statistics and Publications, Policy, Research and Analysis, as well as Financial Inclusion and Financial Sector Development. Before she joined the bank, she served as an economist for National Accounts at the National Planning Commission, Trade Policy Analyst at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and Chief Development Planner at the Department of Women Affairs. She also served in public sector in other capacities, including being a director and board chairperson of several public entities. Experience ranges from macroeconomic statistics and analysis, economic research, development finance, public policy, trade policy, as well as central banking communication. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Emma Haiyambo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to stand on the protocol established by the previous speaker. My task this morning is really to remind ourselves of where we're coming from. Let me take this off. To remind ourselves of where we're coming from, where we are, and where we're going. The aim really is to set the scene for much more deeper discussions later in the day, as lined up on the program. So as I said, really mine is to set the scene and remind ourselves of where we're coming from, where we are, and where we're going. So as a roadmap, I intend taking you through the overview of Namibia's growth performance since independence. I'll then look at Namibia's economic outlook. We will share some lessons in terms of what we are seeing other countries are doing in reviving their economies. We will then make suggestions in terms of what we think Namibia can do to revive the economy before we conclude. So if we look at Namibia's performance since 1990, which is at independence, what has happened really is Namibia has experienced stable economic growth. Look at the first period. I've divided the independence period, since independence period, into 3 or 4 categories, basically, in terms of periods. If you look at the 1990s, from 1990 to 1999, Namibia actually posted a growth rate of 3.6%. And then you move to 2000 to 2009, we posted a growth rate of 4.4%. You go to 2015 to 2010 to 2015, we posted a growth rate of 5.4%. So during this period, if you can see, growth was mainly driven by the secondary sector, but also the tertiary sector. But also, it's important to mention that growth was actually broad-based, because every sector or every industry was actually posting positive growth. But then when you move to 2016 to 2020, things started to change. On average, the Namibian economy contracted by 1.9%. And that is because of many things, but most importantly, you know, the period 2015, if you take the year 2015, a lot of investment was taking place in the mining sector. So there were a number of mines that were being constructed. There were a lot of projects ongoing, especially construction projects in the mining sector. But then also, in 2015, from independence up to 2015, fiscal stimulus was prevailing. But when we moved to 2016, the mining construction projects somehow were completed. And then COVID came in 2020. And then also the government, before 2020, the government was actually now pursuing a fiscal consolidation program. And then COVID came. And that is why we are having the minus 1.9% during that period, 2016 to 2020. Just a bit of details in terms of what has happened for the various industries, for instance. If you take the periods 2005 to 2009, GDP, as I indicated, grew by 3.6% on average. And what has fed that growth is mainly the secondary and tertiary industries. And this is really despite ending with a global economic crisis. You remember the period 2008 to 2009, there was a global economic crisis. But despite that, our economy was resilient, such that a positive growth was actually recorded. We go to the period 2010 to 2015. We again recorded as an economy a growth rate of 5.4% on average. And again, that growth, we find that the primary industries were declining, but secondary and tertiary industries were actually sustaining the economy. And as I said, there was a lot of mining construction activities happening, but also the government stimulus was also still prevailing until that period. Then you come to 2016-2020. As I indicated earlier, growth in average or contracted by an average of 1.9%. And this was a correction in the construction sector, in the wholesale and retail sector, but also then the fiscal consolidation program kicked in, and then COVID finally came in. So, where are we going? We have seen that the period 2016 to 2020, our economy did not perform to the extent that we wanted it to perform. It actually registered a decline in growth of 1.9% on average. So where are we going? Before I say where we're going, in 2021, we do not have a full picture as yet, but indications are from the estimates that we are having currently, is that GDP actually grew by or grew around 1% by a growth of 1%. But if you look at 2022 to 2023, this is what we are seeing. Before I go to the growth rates themselves, I would like to give you an indication of the environment under which the outlook has been or is being determined. So we think that growth in agriculture, forestry and fishing industries or sectors is expected to turn positive in 2022, but remain low due to depressed livestock marketing activity and broadly unchanged fishing quotas. So we're not expecting any changes in terms of the fishing quotas, for instance. The diamond mining sector is expected to register robust growth rates during 2022 and 2023. And this will be mainly boosted by deep marine production, because they've recently acquired a new vessel which is expected to start being operational from the second quarter of this year. Uranium mining, for instance, is expected also to register healthy growth rates. We have seen of recent that uranium prices internationally has been increasing. And I think currently they are hovering around $40 US. And if that then continues and materializes, that would actually spur growth in the uranium sector. It will actually stimulate production in that sector. So then we also think there's going to be moderate growth for metal ores supported by the gold subsector. There's a lot of activities also happening in the gold subsector, especially in Namibian mine, gold mine. And then overall, then is the economy, the domestic economy is anticipated to improve from 2022 onwards. And as I said, largely boosted by the diamonds sector and the recoveries for some tertiary industries. However, that said, we still think COVID is going to remain a risk going forward. So in terms of growth then for 2022, 2023, we are expecting that on average, if you take, in fact, the whole period from 2021 to 2023, we are expecting that GDP will grow by an average of 2.7%. We think for 2022 and 2023, it will probably be around 3%. And as I said, we are about, this is what we are seeing currently. So, we are under the COVID environment. We have seen our growth, or our economy hasn't been growing, especially in the later years, from 2022 onwards, but also before COVID, even before 2020, because of what we have seen has happened since 2016. Physical consolidation program kicking in, and then obviously COVID making things worse for us. So, in looking ahead, we thought to look at other countries that have done something in terms of trying to revive their economies and to learn lessons actually from them, to see if there's anything that we can learn from them and that we can perhaps not replicate the same, but implement in our own economy, taking our context into consideration. So as case studies, we looked at China, Brazil, South Africa, and Botswana. So apart from Botswana, China, Brazil, South Africa are great economies, and they have done something in terms of putting in place post-COVID recovery plans or strategies. Particularly China was actually, or is being considered as, that country that has managed really to get out of, they are still struggling also, but they have done quite a lot in terms of trying to get themselves out of the mood. So they came back, they had an early return to positive growth in Q2 of 2020 already. And if you look at Botswana, we have taken Botswana to learn from, because they also have a strategy in place And somehow their economic structure is similar to ours. So this is what we are seeing from China. China basically devised a program to provide biomedical products and medical supplies to developing countries, increasing basically their exports. So they saw an opportunity in this whole thing of COVID, and they said, if this is what is happening, what can we do? And they came up with that program. And then they adopted the domestic demand-led growth strategy, basically then to counter the disruption of the world trade brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then what they also then did was they incentivized the manufacturing sector to basically then adapt to, earlier on I said they decided to provide biometric or biomedical products and so on. So they incentivized their manufacturing sector to be able then to do all those things and be able to export. And then following just one quarter contraction in Q1 2020, China returned positive growth from Q2 2020. If you look at South Africa close to home, they have a reconstruction and recovery plan where government basically aims to invest in infrastructure. And the aim is really to boost demand, revive construction, and increase employment, and mostly through the public-private partnership arrangements. Then South Africa also decided they will look at their energy security aspect, and then also then to reduce the cost of doing business in the economy. And this is something that Namibia has been grappling with, both the energy aspect and also the cost of doing business. I think for many years we have been struggling on that front. I know that there have been some initiatives, and I hope we are getting there in terms of addressing the issue of cost of doing business. And then South Africa also said they have to look at the diversification of their economic structure. We have had the first speaker also touching on that. In the case of Namibia, perhaps that is something that we need to do as well. However, there are challenges in South Africa. For instance, the debt is ballooning, but they've managed to put a plan in place. An emergency income protection program is something that they've decided to do. What it does is it really pays over half of a minimum wage for up to 3 months for uncovered workers who became unemployed. And then they have a program to support micro and small enterprises in the form of tax and or employment incentives, for instance. The government is doing that. So then there are also government initiatives to reduce the gaps in the uptake of digital technologies and competencies amongst firms. We have had the first speaker touching on digital technologies. Maybe that's something that Namibia also needs. And then they have a program to support agriculture. So basically, you can see Brazil also has a plan in place in terms of how they should revive their economy. Then Botswana, as I said, we have selected to learn from them because they have similar economic structure such as ours. What I found interesting in the Botswana case is that they have particularly decided to do something for their informal sector. So what they have done is they've created a dedicated agency for the informal sector. I just wanted to, the other day I posed a question to a colleague saying, look, Namibia has done so many things in terms of measures, relief measures during COVID and so on. But if you look at these relief measures, and they were outlined earlier by Governor here in his opening remarks, if you look at those relief measures, the question is, how much of what we have done actually went to the informal sector? And I think the response that I got from my colleague is something that needs to that we need to ponder on. Because basically what the colleague said was like, look, if you look at the informal sector, it's so disorganized, there is no structure, and it becomes difficult for to channel any support basically to them. It somehow becomes difficult. Any support that you want to channel to the informal sector is probably not going to be that effective because there is no organized structure for the sector. So what Botswana also has done is that that agency has been tasked to manage a sectoral business intelligence database on or for the informal sector. Then they also looked at their agricultural productivity, and then they developed the agro-food system. So those are some of the lessons that we are learning from Botswana. But if we come to our own case, or basically what are some of the key things that are coming out from those lessons? Before we come there, let me acknowledge that Namibia has had interventions, basically, to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, and they were outlined earlier by the government. A combination of fiscal stimulus packages, for instance, monetary policy was the lowest in how many years? The Bank of Namibia also put in place some macroprudential and other measures to kind of curb the impact of COVID. There were also other stakeholders that have put initiatives in place. Now, those measures actually, I think to a great extent, helped our economy. Maybe that is also what has assisted what we are seeing in terms of 2021. While the growth is probably not going to be a high growth, I think it's still going to be positive, and that is actually good news for us. And I would also then like to acknowledge the fact that there are efforts actually by government, and I know the Bank of Namibia is also involved in that, directed at diversifying the Namibian economy. The Harvard Growth Lab is something that was mentioned earlier on. And the Namibian economy and the Bank of Namibia is working together with the Harvard Growth Lab on the diversification project. So the key question, we have put all these initiatives in place. Are they sufficient? Or should we do something? And I think the fact that we are here today is probably in acknowledging the need to still do something. So what is that we need to do? Is the key question, and hopefully by the end of this seminar we will have some answers to that. So from the case studies that we have learned from those countries that I highlighted, we are thinking diversification of the economy is key. It's one of the things that we are learning. I know we are already busy with that. It's really just a confirmation again that other countries are doing that. So we are probably not on the wrong path. And then the whole issue of PPP arrangements is something that we also need to look into. Then we have also seen that many economic recovery strategies in those countries are actually government-led. Question for Namibia is, can our government at this point in time afford to do what those other governments are doing? We don't have fiscal space currently. Then the other issue that was coming out of those lessons is the importance of the private sector in this whole process. And especially more for Namibia because of the physical space that we don't have. The private sector really becomes a key, or should be the key player in our drive to reviving economic growth in Namibia. So, This is what we are suggesting, and they are not necessarily new things. You have heard Governor has mentioned some of these things also in his opening remarks. However, it's worth reiterating them. It's worth highlighting them so that as we discuss during the rest of the day, that we touch on those things and see and come up with concrete strategies perhaps. For instance, if you take the aspect of intensifying resource mobilization, we said there is no fiscal space. So something has to be done on the revenue side to try and get us some impact. There is already something happening. NAMRA is already looking into issues of increasing efficiency, issues of compliance. However, we are just saying maybe that process, given what we intend to do, needs to be kind of fast-tracked. How can we try and fast-track some of those initiatives that are ongoing or that we are kind of, that we have initiated already? So how can we fast-track that in the interest of us reviving the economy? Then the other aspect or other suggestion is that we need to really increase, as Namibia, we need to increase investment in ICT and digital infrastructure. I think COVID came and COVID highlighted the need for digitalization, the need for technological advancement in the country. So how then do we leverage from where we are today to where we need to be going forward? So if we invest in those digital infrastructure, I think it will assist e-commerce, for instance, and also just efficiency in terms of the delivery of public services. And this. Then we think there's also a need, and I mentioned this earlier, to enhance the role of the private sector in the economy. Private sector should actually play a role in the innovation, in terms of production, in terms of exports, in terms of creating employment. So if we get involved and invest in innovation and digitalization, infrastructure and so on, I think what is going to assist us in doing that should really be the private sector. And then the private sector should actually take advantage of opportunities arising from investing in the ICT and digital infrastructure to get themselves involved in the health, education. I'm picking up is that elsewhere in other jurisdictions, and it's going to be the same for Namibia going forward, the private sector can no longer only involve itself in the business, traditional business-related activities. There is an opportunity now. We need to look at how, as private sector, can we get involved in sectors such as health, education, and social and other social sectors. So then there has to be regular consultations between government and the private sector. Because if we have to work together and if there has to be this cohesion in terms of us trying to drive the revival of the economy, then there will always have to be that engagement. I know there has been some engagement, but there is always a need for us to intensify those. Then supporting small and medium enterprises will always remain on the list. Why? It's because small businesses, small and medium businesses are actually supposed to be the drivers of the economy in this whole equation. Yes, the private sector, but particularly also the small and medium enterprises, because we have seen already what they have done with the small base of small and medium enterprises that we have, what they are able to do in terms of creating employment, for instance. So a post-COVID strategy needs to allocate priority to renewed growth in the SME sector. Then the whole issue that there are differing views and opinions out there. Some views are pointing towards this whole thing coming to perhaps now change the whole setup in the Namibian economy, or the whole structure of the Namibian economy, and maybe it will also contribute to the creation of employment and so on. But there are also other views that are saying maybe what we're thinking in terms of employment creation is not really going to happen, but it's something that we can ponder on, it's something that we can discuss, and so on. But we know that there is already, that project is actually already in the pipeline. And then intensify investment in the housing. I think, like the SME sector, I think this one should also be on our list at all times. I don't think in Namibia there's need for me to explain why. So many of our people are living in shacks, for instance. We know also that there is a backlog in terms of housing. So we can, COVID came and COVID highlighted the need for proper sanitation, infrastructure, including housing in Namibia. Because if that is not done, and you get yourself, or you find yourself in a crisis environment again like COVID, then it's going to cause a lot of issues for us. It's probably long term, but we need to start working on that as well. So what is going to be key, and Governor alluded to that area in terms of the municipalities, is that we need probably to see, on the basis of PPP's arrangements, what is it that we can do to enhance growth and development in our local authorities and municipalities. So what is it that I have said since I started, basically? So what I've said is that Namibia's economic structure has not changed significantly. Growth is still dependent on extractive industries. You have heard me say, going forward, the mining sector is going to play a significant role in the revival of the Namibian economy. So it's still dependent on extractive industries. So, and that, I think, in my view, needs to change. So the question is, how does it change, and what exactly should change? I'm leaving it there. Then our growth, as I said, is expected to average 2.7% between 2021 and 2023. And again, largely supported by diamond and mining sector and uranium costs. Government has fiscal space between the period 1990 to probably up to 2015. And then we decided to go on to a fiscal consolidation program. Currently, that space is not there. So what is it that we need to do? Namibia needs to take advantage of the high demand for ICT and digital infrastructure. And as I indicated earlier, that need was actually enhanced by the pandemic. The pandemic highlighted the need for that. It's critical that we look at the SME sector, that we have dedicated strategies of developing that sector, because it will assist us in employment creation and even in the growth of the economy. So the lowest hanging fruit, I think, is in the tourism industry. It's something that we can perhaps already look at now, especially with the low COVID numbers that we are having now. How about, for instance, replacing the negative PCR test requirement for tourists? And we replace that with only showing your vaccination passport, for instance. Other countries are doing that, and I think Botswana has introduced that recently. Green hydrogen is something that I mentioned that we don't need to ponder on, it's already ongoing. And what is also important that I would like to reiterate is we need to reduce the digital divide between small and big or businesses and urban areas, because there is really a divide in as far as technological advancement and digitalization is concerned. That's the end of my story. Thank you very much.